How many people are there in your head? Can you count them on one hand? Or do you need 4 pairs of hands? Because when I was a teenager and I went to the psychologist, I clearly remember my psychologist saying that I had 24 versions of me in my head. There was critical me, insecure me, angry me, shy me, OCD me, anxious me, and many other different versions of me roaming around, going rogue, and taking over my brain. And I remember that we counted 24 in total. And I remember feeling or having more clarity, but I also remember feeling more unclear because now I had to deal with all of these one-sided versions of me living in my brain. But whilst it did help me a little bit to understand what I was going through and to pinpoint my problems that were happening in my brain, it really begs the question, does identification with things actually help you? We all know that language is important. When we talk about ourselves, most of us do so in a way where it seems like there are 2 versions of us.
I have had a hard time lately dealing with myself.
I am so proud of myself.
So there's an I and there's a me. But does it really matter that we talk like this about ourselves? Let me try again. Does it really matter if we talk like this? Obviously yes, because why would I make that point? Even though identifying the little me's in my brain that were causing absolute mayhem did bring me some clarity, it also set me up for a life full of identification with those things. I am certainly not blaming the psychologist, because without her, I don't know if I would be alive today. This is just a thing that happens because most people believe in identification with things, with traits, with other people, with circumstances that they've gone through and with their pasts. So I went on fully believing that I was a part of those little me's running around my brain. I got cocaine. So I went on believing fully that I was some sort of a part of those little me's
running around my brain.
This meant I was shy, angry, sad, misunderstood, lonely, I felt guilty, I was embarrassed about myself, I self-judged myself, I was too critical about myself, all because of those 24 little me's
running around my brain.
And yes, identification to things brings you clarity, and I'm certainly not denying that it didn't help me at all. But after a certain period of time, you not only gain clarity, you become those things. And those things will reinforce themselves onto your identity and make sure that you identify with them so that they can survive in a way. Now, I'm not so sure what thoughts are. At least they are some form of energy. They might even be some kind of entity. But I know that they're not you. And I know that thoughts and anything that's negative that you've identified yourself with, it's not you. I'd like to remind you that at the time where I was introduced to those, or I gained clarity of those 24 little me's, I was 16 at the time. I'm now 26 and I do not recognize myself from who I was back then. And you can say to me, yeah, but you know,
a lot happens in 10 years.
A lot can happen.
You change a lot. A lot of people are surprised when I tell them how depressed I was, how anxious I was, that I had a fear of going out. They are surprised to hear that I was depressed or anxious. They think that I had a different past because I'm so different now, and that's just the key. I do have a different past because I'm a different person. But that's something for another video. So what is the actual reason that I stopped being who I was? Was it just time that went on? No, I chose to stop identifying with those 24 me's in my brain. I got cocaine. Jesus, I have to actually follow a script now. I tried to stop talking as if there were more than one of me. And I know that probably if I tried, it probably didn't work. Which is correct, because sometimes I still talk about myself. Yeah, and see, that's exactly where it goes wrong. Identification leads to clarity. Yes, but it also leads to limitations. I wanted the sentence to be cooler, but it's kind of like... not. And why is this? Because it's a paradox. The more you identify with things, the more the rift between who you really are and who you identify with becomes greater. And why is this? Because there's no one there. How can you identify with things and expect to not limit yourself when in actuality there is no one there? Get this into your brain where there might be 24 or 36 or 78 little yous running around. There's no one there. You are not your body. You are not your thoughts. You are not your work. You are not your society. You are not your problems. You are not your possessions. You are not your partner, and you are not your gender. You are not your self-made up identity. And why do you think there are so many people who feel better when they practice meditation? It's because you take the you have been identifying yourself with out of the equation, and you make space for the real you to be in the moment, to be everything and everything and everything and all at once, like the movie. And you feel happy because you don't have to identify with things. You don't have to limit yourself anymore. You are who you truly are. And I don't want to say that you can't express yourself through your identity, through your gender, through your clothes, through your possessions. I mean, we're here to experience all of that. But most of us are the happiest when we get all that stuff out of the way and when we meditate and when we become just who we really are. This spiritual mumbo jumbo that I'm saying to you, it kind of makes sense. And when you identify, it kind of seems like a paradox. But like, as I said, you're still here, you still have a body. And you might argue to me, if I don't have an identity, then who am I? Why can't I identify with things? And how do you explain my body? How do you explain Earth? How do you explain the things that are happening outside of me? And, I think that's an excellent point to make. Because I made that point to you. There are certainly things happening, and people with names and people with genders and people with clothes and possessions. But the problem only arises when you identify too much with those things. I mean, everything that you see around you, and including your body, your name, your personality, is essentially meaningless. And it only gains meaning if we give meaning to it. I mean, the meaning of life is to give life meaning. Giving meaning to something is the same as labeling things or identifying with things. You attach yourself to that thing and give it meaning. You identify, you label. And there's absolutely, as I said, no problem with that. But today you see an excess in identification with things. Maybe you want to manifest something and you can't let it go. It's because you're giving it too much meaning. You're giving it too much identification. You are too attached to that thing. And most of people identify with a lot of things because they want to seem more inclusive. They want to seem more inclusive and more open about themselves and more open to the world. But what it seems to do for a lot of people is that it just creates more of a division. And it also brings a lot of confusion about the people's selves and what their identity actually is. Don't forget, it's a paradox. The more you try to identify something which in itself has no meaning or identification, that's when this rift starts to be created. What people don't understand is that if you give something meaning, and let's give an example, in this case, of a negative trait, which could be seen as negative when it's taken to an extreme. So let's take shyness, for an example. Being shy is a trait I identified myself with for most of my teenage life and my early adolescent life. When you keep saying to yourself how shy you are, how awful and how difficult the upcoming presentation is going to be because of your shyness, how not so able you are to talk to a guy or the girl that you like, when you do this and when you keep doing this, is it really helping you to say I am shy, therefore reinforcing this identity about yourself, therefore creating it? Is it really helping you? Is the gaining clarity of you being shy, is it really going to help you in the long run? Because I truly believe that just with this example of shyness is the reason why there are so many introverts today. You're not introverted, you are shy because you label yourself as shy because it's a trait that you've possessed. Please, I know what I'm talking about. I have had this trait for I think over 15 years. And I've just recently grown away from it, grown into another direction. The introverts and extroverts debate, I guess, I will create is a whole video in itself. I'm not going to talk about that anymore right now. But if I had kept beating the drum of, I am so shy, I can never change, I'm just a shy person, yeah, I'm introverted, I don't like talking to people, I find it really hard, I struggle with talking to boys, I wouldn't be making videos on YouTube today. I would still be convinced that at least for me, you know, there are people who are shy, they make videos, okay, blah, blah. But for me, it was tied to me feeling like I wasn't good enough to make videos, or wasn't good enough for my voice to be heard, or that I couldn't make a contribution to YouTube or to people's lives, or not good enough to verbally get my point across, because I was convinced of that for a long time too, as I got very nervous doing any presentation or talking in front of a group of people. I got very nervous. And my point here is stop identifying. To seek for identification with things will only lead to more seeking of identification with things. As I said, the paradox is here. How can you be identified as something which in itself has no identification? Keep seeking more things, keep putting them on who you actually are, just means that you eventually are going to have to take more layers off. You know, like an onion, you need to be peeled off, like the Shrek fucking analogy. That's what you're doing to yourself. And a good example of just, it's gonna lead to more seeking, is the book The Alchemist, which is a famous book about someone who was seeking for an answer that was found within themselves all along. And when you go on this journey, you actually find that there is no self. But you have to find out what that truly means for yourself. Damn it.